You are golden, you are good enough, like your fire from within. You're inspired, you inspire us, it's gonna be all good again.
Welcome back to the Roar Indie Author Interview Series. My name is Brianna. I'm your host. These podcasts are brought to you by iFreak Publishing and the Mama Knows Not a podcast. Today we have author Kristian James with us out in California. It's really exciting. I'm based here in Florida. So welcome to the show, Kristian, and let's get right to it. What inspired you to be an author?
So I've been writing since I was a kid. One of the first stories I ever wrote was in junior high, and I grew up watching horror movies with my mom, so I very much got into writing in that regard. And my first story ever was actually a werewolf story. And my teacher, Mrs. Morrison, came to me after I wrote my short story, and she goes, I'm going to be one of the first people to buy your book when you get published. Unfortunately, I can't track her down or find her. I even contacted my school, and they're like, we have no record of that person. That was all they wrote me back. I'm like, well, she had two names because she got married between, but I gave them both. And I'm like, how do you not have a record of my teacher?
That's weird.
So fast forward, in high school, I got a free write in my composition class. I wrote a slasher story, and all my individuals in my class, my classmates, had one person to pick to read their story, and they picked me. And I'm reading my story, and it's about 10 pages, and all the girls are covering their eyes, their mouth, they're freaking out. And at the end, my teacher goes, I have one question. What's wrong with you? And I go, a lot. And it's funny, I got a C on the paper because he said it wasn't original enough. But then, fast forward, I've been writing scripts and all that stuff since I was in my 20s. And then December of 2019, just before COVID, I had the privilege of meeting one of my favorite authors, Chris Van Allsburg, Jumanji and Polar Express. And I was with my girlfriend, now wife at the time, and I was like, I think I want to try to write kids stuff. She goes, that's different. How did that change? I go, I don't know. I want to make people happy. I don't want to try to scare them anymore. And that's really how I got into All Hallows Eve in Salem and Once Upon a Christmas Eve in Salem and building our Main Street. And that's actually what, led me down to actually getting published.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. I'm not one for horror or gore. And though I was born on Halloween, so I can appreciate an old Hallows Eve tale. But there are a lot. It's a great market. And I remember as a kid reading all those R.L. Stine books, which were super creepy, for 10-year-olds. But yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about the books that are part of the Roar series.
Sure. So for the Roar series, I have my first published book is called All Hallows Eve in Salem. So it has all the classic Universal monsters. So it has Frankie, Drac, Wolfie, Gilly, the Mummy, Meredith, the Purple Witch. And pretty much what it is it's a story showing you how all the monsters are preparing to celebrate Halloween in Salem, Massachusetts. Salem, Massachusetts is known as the unofficial town of Halloween. Every year they almost brought in 1 million people this past year from in September and October for the Halloween season. And I really just wanted to do something a little unique and different and show how, where the monsters are and how they're accepted and they're not looked at as different, and pretty much show how they're everyday people. And on Halloween night, Frankie works at the Witch Museum passing out candy, and Halloween doesn't officially kick off till Wolfie howls, and the witches live in the Ropes Mansion, which is the house from Hocus Pocus where Allison lives, and that's where they're making their candied apples to drop into the bags of the children of Salem below. And again, we all grew up with monsters and everything in that regard, but the funny story is monsters tend to have a very sad story of how they became, what they are. So what if we make it kid friendly and again, bring more attention to Salem? Because when you mention Salem, Massachusetts, it's always the witch trials. Salem has a very vast history of being one of the largest port cities in the 1700s and one of the biggest places, and it's, where Nathaniel Hawthorne was and the House in Seven Gables. And again, it's known for the movie Hocus Pocus. And that's really what I wanted to do. Is I wanted to write a book about togetherness and happiness and show all the great parts of Salem, not just, the stigma of, these 20 people were killed back in, 1692, 1693.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's a great point too, is my son, he'll be 5 this year, but he's just getting into like Monsters Inc., that Disney Pixar film or whatever. And he's like, oh, are monsters real, mommy? Are monsters scary? Like, because there's this, like you're saying, this history of these creatures being creepy and, terrorizing everybody. So if you're like flipping that script and then bringing more educational components to it, like Salem, like you're saying, is a fascinating city. So I just love that you're like, shaking it up a little bit. This is not a lot of material out there like that. That's really cool. Now, since you are writing for kids, is there a specific age group that your stories are best for?
So I always say my stories are for like kids ages 2 to 11. And then when you stop caring what other people think, because
it's great.
Because it's funny, like my biggest fan bases when it comes to my books tend to be moms. I call them my spooky moms. And their kids, I have people still messaging me on Instagram, sending me pictures of my book with their child. And, it's February now and they're like, my kid I have to read, All Hallows Eve to my child at least once a day, or now Once Upon a Christmas Eve in Salem once a day. Because I always say, like, when you're a kid, like, you have your passions and your love. And then when you become a teenager, you're like, oh, I'm not into that. No, that's embarrassing. That's this. But then when you hit, like, 20, 22, 23 again, it's like I resorted back to going and loving the Ninja Turtles back like I did when I was 5 or 6, and the Power Rangers and that kind of thing. So that's what I always tell people. I'm like, my books are aged 2 to 11, and when you stop caring what other people think.
That's good. I think that's a really good point too. There's always those like founding things that kids are interested in, and then peer pressure takes over. So that's exciting. What does it mean to you to be part of something like Roar and the Golden Ticket to Literacy?
Yeah, I think it's awesome because I remember being a kid and going to the library, and like I honestly would have picked a book with monsters on the cover. Like I used to go to the library, and there are these orange books that had all the classic Universal Monsters stories in them, and Godzilla. And like, so when my publisher contacted me about it, he goes, hey, we have this opportunity. I'm like, oh my goodness, that's amazing. I want that. And he goes, well, there's a lot of books there, it's a very difficult thing. I'm like, I don't care. Try to, I want to try to get in there because to me, that's just amazing. Like, I love going to schools and talking to kids and like reading my books and answering questions because like you asked me, like, what made you want to be an author? I don't know. I just like writing. I like creating. I like being able to craft my own worlds and my own characters and my own stories. And, they're not all hits. I'll send them to my wife and she'll be like, this one needs a little work. And I'm like, that's not the feedback I need. I need like why it doesn't work or, I always say like the fact that it's in a school and it's something that's considered a prize. It's so awesome to me. And I tell people all the time, like, I don't know if you've seen on my website, I created a toy called Drax's Tomb in a Room where it's like Elf on a Shelf, but it's with a vampire Dracula and he hangs upside down and he can hold 5 pounds and he's meant to be like Halloween fun, right? And I've had so many people love the character that I started doing his voice. And I have parents messaging me going, can you do a voice message for my child? I'm like, oh yeah. I don't charge for it. It's free. Like I tell people, if you buy my book or you get my book and I'm going to be in an event, bring it to me. I'll personalize it. I'll sign it to you. Like I tell people, like, I'm always trying to create things that are free because right now families are struggling. And if I can do stuff to make people happy, even if it's a 20-second video, like I'm going to do it because that's going to bring a smile to their face, to their parents' face. And, I remember growing up and my parents being upset and sad that they couldn't get me something because we didn't have the money. And I'm a big proponent of helping people the most I can. And I always tell people, like with my Building Our Main Street book, which is to help families that have lost a family member, like if somebody's lost someone and they need a book and you can't afford one, just message me. I'm going to mail it to you. I don't need, whatever. Like I need you guys to be helped. I don't need the $3 profit. Like, I always tell people, I'm like, yes, it would be amazing to sell 1 million copies and to be able to retire. Right. But at the end of the day, my books are meant to help people. And my wife and I have agreed that if somebody needs help or this can help somebody in the time of need, I always ask, just send me their address. I will surprise them and send them a book.
Well, I also think that because you never know where that core memory is going to pop up, especially for a child. And then that's the moment that they decide something, or that it made such an impression on their life that they, pay it forward when they're an adult. Like, there's certain moments I think we all have as adults now that we reflect upon that we didn't realize were so ingrained in our brain that have made us who we are today or put us on a certain path. And if you can be that positive impact for a child, even if it's a 20-second video, like that, it's a great thing to do, So that's awesome of you to do that.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe in paying it forward, especially because, again, that's what I always tell people too. I'm like, hey, I will send them a book, but do me a favor later on, pay it forward. Like, when somebody else needs help, please don't be like, oh, that's going to cost $20. No, that's going to change that could literally change somebody's life. Like, there's stories of people that were going to commit suicide, and somebody smiled at them and just asked them how their day was, and it changed them because that split 5-second hello, how are you, made them go, wow, people do care.
Right, exactly. And you can never be too kind. Every day I tell my kid before he goes to school, what are you going to choose? And be kind, like choose kindness. So that's a big thing in our house. It doesn't take a lot of effort to be nice to somebody, even when you're having a bad day. So, right? I won't go down that rabbit hole, but it doesn't take a lot. For aspiring writers, what is something that you would offer them as advice or insight?
Sure. My best advice is always just write. Like, people are like, I got to write 1,000 words a day. I'm like, no, you really don't. Like, if you don't have an idea, like, maybe take a break, write notes, jot your ideas down. Like, my notes are in my phone. So I'll have ideas and I'll jot it down. Cause again, I may have an idea, but I don't have it fleshed out yet. Like All Hallows Eve in Salem. Like, I was, it was actually, we call it our COVID honeymoon. We were in Salem for Halloween, and we're walking down Essex, and I go, I want to write a book about monsters in Salem. She goes, what's it going to be about? I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea. But I had notes, and I was like, I want these people. Like, I want Dracula and Frankie and all them. And then like 2 months later, I was in my kitchen with my wife, and I go, I have my idea. I'm going to go to my office. 20 minutes later, I came out. She came into my office, and I was like, I have it done. And she goes, really? I'm like, I need to read it one more time, though, because I think there's a couple things I need to tweak. And then I gave it to her, and she goes, wow, okay. So she's like, that's really fast. I'm like, well, that's how I write. Like, I've been in the military, and I was diagnosed with high functioning anxiety, PTSD, from my time in Iraq and Afghanistan and stuff. And I tell my wife, I go, it's one of those things that I think it worked out because it helps me write really fast. Like, I have the ability to type and write as I think. So it's like a flow of conscious. And I tell my wife, I'm like, watching the musical Hamilton makes me realize, holy crap, that's how he was. I'm like, he just would write as he thought. And I go, that's kind of how I've been. But I just tell people, like, if you want to write, just sit down, come up with ideas and then sit down and write. And then send it to your friends. Ask them for advice. Don't get upset with them. But also, hopefully, you have a circle of people that will give you constructive criticism and not be like, what is this? This is terrible. My wife's the biggest proponent of, because she was an English teacher before she became an assistant principal, she would just write to me, needs more detail. And I'm like, oh, I hate that. But then again, once the book is illustrated, I actually have to go back and delete a lot of the detail because it's not needed anymore because it's on the picture.
Because the images.
So I just tell people, I'm like, hey, if you want to write. I go, look, there's plenty of stuff I've written that's not good. But you know what? I'm growing, and I've learned, and I've grown, because again, if you read something that I wrote in 2008 to today, it's completely different. My voice has changed. My ability to write has changed. My words have changed. I go, you're constantly growing, so you're evolving as a writer. So, don't give up and just have fun with it. Don't get stressed.
That's great insight. I love that. And where can students, teachers, parents, can they find your books?
So my books are on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com and on all the other websites. But if you want a signed and personalized copy, I have a website called World of Christian James. It's Kristian .com. And in there, when you purchase a book, it says, "Can I personalize it?" And what I do is I sign it to whoever you'd like. And I always try to come up with a special message. If you buy it on my website, it's a little bit different if you meet me in Salem and I have a table, because like I had a lot of people there in October, which was amazing, but I didn't get the opportunity to like spend as much time with everybody as I would like. But I try to write something special to everyone. And like I said, all 3 of my books are on there, and then the Dracs are also there if you want one. I don't sign or personalize those because it'll smudge on the box. I did a test, but with and here's the thing too, I sign to as many children or people you want. And then with the Dracs, just let me know how many kids you have, because we add an extra set of fangs, like little plastic fangs. So you can join in the fangy good time with Drac.
That's awesome. I love that. I feel like my kid would appreciate that right now. He's in a very big dress up monster phase, as I mentioned, as well as his fish phase and pirate phase.
That's awesome.
It's like all swarming together. Yeah, it's an interesting day in our house. Thank you so much for your time, Kristian. Really appreciate it. Again, you can find him at worldofchristianjames.com. And until next time, we hope you're having fun reading and writing.
You don't have to read between